know what kind of properties. So what is the difference between or different characteristics of intellectual property which from the other properties such as land, vehicle, building, whatever you usually know. So the table which in my slide would give you a brief idea about the characteristics of IP. So if you consider the first three kinds of property, one is the land, building, and vehicle. So are they tangible? Yes, they are tangible. What do you mean by tangible? Can you see it? Can you buy it? Can you perceive it through your senses? Yes, you can. When it comes to IP, you don't really see an property like that. So the measurement of a IP is difficult because if you see land, you can measure it in square meter. In building, you can measure it in square feet. In vehicle, you can measure it in a model. So in IP, it is very difficult to measure what kind of property we have. And once, as you see in land, building, and vehicle, once you know how much is your land, then only the value of the land can be easily identified depending upon the model. When it comes to IP, just having an IP is not important. After having the IP, identifying the value of IP is very much important. Now there are different authorities such as the state government, municipal corporation, and RTO for vehicle, land, and building. Similarly, for IP, there is the patent office, trademark office, geographical indication office, all these offices which follow and which help us to register our different kinds of IP. So it's easy to sell a land, building, and vehicle because you know the value of land, vehicle, and the building after the market. But when it comes to IP, you really need to know what power your IP has in order to sell it. So this is what is the difference between intellectual property and property, but still how it's same and why is it called a property. So as I mentioned, intellectual property is a property. So what is an intellectual property right? So it is a right vested in the asset, not the asset itself. So having my mind or my intellectual is not the right. Once I act upon it, whether I patent it, whether I trademark it, whether I register it as a geographical indication, that is when it is called as an IPR or intellectual property right. So for example, an idea or an invention is an intellectual property, but a registered patent is an IPR as in intellectual property right. A customer, a price list is an IP, but once you registered it as a copyright, it is called as an IPR. A secret production method is still an IP as in intellectual property, but once you registered it under a trade secret, then only you get it called as an IPR. Similarly, when it comes to brand values or brand, the trade name is the IP, but once you register it as an IPR in the name of trademark, then only you can enjoy the benefits of it. So how usually intellectual property law works? It is a negative right. So what do I mean by a negative right? Until and unless you register your intellectual property, you're not entitled to the economic benefits for it. Even after registering for your IP, once you register, you can't stop anyone else from registering until and unless they infringe yours. So if you see what is called as a negative right is when someone tries to infringe your property, intellectual property, that is the time only we can file a lawsuit against a transgressor. So in order to file a lawsuit against a transgressor, we first need to have that right. So this is how usually an intellectual property law works. So today I will be dealing with different kinds of IP rights. So what will we cover today in our lecture is one, patent, second, copyright, third, trademark, geographical indication, designs, and trade secrets. There are two more IPRs called as with plant varieties and semiconductor integrated circuit, which are not relevant for today's lecture, but still I'll explain it to you in two lines. So what is plants variety? As I go ahead in the patent, I will show you that under section 3 of patent, you cannot apply patent for plant varieties. So what do you do when you have a new plant or a admixture or a mixture of different kinds of seeds? How, if you are not protected, if you can't protect it under patent, then what can you protect it under? Because India being an agricultural country, farmers daily or have find a new ways to increase their crop value, increase their crop yield. So what can you do once you get a new seed after doing some chemical alterations to it or even physical alterations to it? Then you can register them under Plant Varieties Act. Second is the semiconductor integrated circuits. The semiconductor integrated circuit is a, as everyone knows, is a kind of integrated circuit which is nowadays used widely in range of computers. So it's very difficult to get a patent to a semiconductor integrated circuit because there are hundreds of thousands of new elements which are or the designs which are used in semiconductor integrated circuit. So it will take a lot of time to patent something like that, and that's why a new act called as Semiconductor Integrated Circuit will help you in registering your this IP. So let's start with what is patents. So patents is one of the most important intellectual property right and most widely used intellectual property right. Usually, as I know, there is a diverse audience right now, people from faculties from architecture, faculties from engineering background are attending this session. So I would try to relate with every one school of engineering or architecture what kind of IPR would be more helpful for them. So for engineering school, patents is one of the most important uh, IPR. So what do you get when you file for a patent? So first of all, you get a legal grant to use to make an exclusive use of the invention. The word exclusive means no one else has the right to use your patent. But for what time? The period is limited for 20 years. So in these 20 years, you have the exclusive right to use it and also stop using others from selling it without your own authorization. So not necessary you should after inventing use the product or start your own manufacturing product. You can also you have the right to sell, to license, or to mortgage all other properties which we can. Same like that, we can license a patent, sell a patent, and mortgage a patent to different kinds of companies. So it is a territorial right. What do you mean by a right which is territorial? You can once you get a patent registered in India, you can use it in India itself and stop others from importing products which are related or infringing your patent in India itself, not outside India. So this is what is called as a territorial right. So in order to get these benefits, what do you need to do? First, the foremost is have an idea. Once you have an idea, have an application, file an application, pay the fees, then you have to disclose how your invention works in sufficient detail. And once if the patent office accepts it and has some queries, you need to answer them in order to show that how your invention is better than anything in the market. And that doesn't stop. The processing and registration is not the last process of patent granting. Once you get a patent, you also need to be on a lookout for any infringement of your own patent. So in brief, I would like to explain the patent procedure in India right now. So you start with provisional application. So what is called as a provisional application? You give a little bit of detail about about your invention and establish a priority date. Priority date is basically to show that this is the date from which my patent should be started in the process. After 12 months, you get a 12 months of time to give your complete specification of whatever your invention is. After that, there is the publication process. If before the publication process, the patent office has some queries regarding what your application is, or there is some changes needed to be in application, you need to answer to that. So after publication, there comes the first filing request for examination. So then you have to file for an examination by the patent office and ask them to validate your patent. So if they feel that your patent matches all the criterias which a patent should have, then it goes to the second last step of granting you the patent and publication the process. If not, they issue a first examination report. After the first examination report, you have a period of around 12 months in order to file your answers to the patent office. to the timeline for compliance to your first examination report. If your examination report is accepted, then again you go back to the same intimation of granting a patent and then publication. In all this process, you will realize the timeline of patent procedure is very lengthy. The whole reason behind it is very much difficult to get patent in India because of the strictness uh, in order and the timeline we need to follow, because it has more economical rights than other IPRs. So this is a trade-off. Even a patent would grant you a lot of money to be specific than copyright, but you need to go through all this process, and your invention needs to be so strong that it can't be rejected. So when I say your patent needs to be strong, what are the tests which you can usually provide the eligibility of patent? So once you have an invention, the nonce test is what you should remember, which provides the inventor that in order to gauge what kind of patent power he has. So first is the novelty requirement. What do you mean by novelty? Novelty means new. Your invention should not be anywhere in the world published, or it should not be used anywhere in the world. It should be very original, and it should be very unique, and it should be very new. New as in you can build over a certain kind of invention, but whatever the invention you have shouldn't be used anywhere publicly in the world. There are patent offices, there are patent sites where you can do this priority art search and get to know whether your patent is or your invention is novel or not. The second point comes is the utility or industrial application. Just having an invention which is new doesn't grant you a patent. In order to get a patent, your invention should have the utility. It should be industrially applicable. What do you mean by industrial applicability? It needs to be produced or manufactured in an industry. And more important, the most important point is every time you use that invention, it should create the same results. It can't be that out of 10 times your invention creates a result for 5 times and you still file for a patent. Your patent will be discarded. It should have industrial applicability and it should be used so a number of times and should grant the same result. Third is the non-obviousness or the inventive step. So what do you mean by non-obviousness? Non-obviousness is a person who is in, if the person is able to skilled in the field of, let's take an example of mechatronics. If he is a person who is a student of mechatronics, given a certain idea to him, is able to know what kind of invention you are doing, then it is not called as an inventive step. To tell in a very layman term, I will take an example of a wheel and a chair. A chair with wheels, if you say, is non-patentable object, because wheel is an invention which is already done. Chair is an one more invention which is already done. You are just mixing two inventions to get a new product. This cannot be called as a invention. This is very much obvious to any person skilled in that art. I would like to point out that non-obviousness does not necessarily mean that your invention should be very complex. A simple invention can also be patented. For example, if you have gone to any coffee shops nowadays, any cafes, they have a coffee collar or a coffee holder alongside the cup, which helps you to have a coffee even it's boiling hot and not burn your hand. So that kind of invention is very simple invention, but it has a inventive step and it is non-obvious. So the fourth point is the statutory subject matter. So after following all these three, if your subject matter or if your invention doesn't fall under section 3 of Patents Act, then it can be patented. So in brief, I will tell what is the section 3 of Patents Act. So section 3 of the Patents Act tell that if your invention is against public morality, or if your invention is something regarding atomic energy, let's say uranium or all the fission and fusion experiments, then you're not granted patent. It cannot be a simple admixture, as I said, simple mixing of two things and then getting a patent. It will not be granted. It can't be against the morality of public. You can't create a poison which can kill many hundreds of people and then ask for a patent, even being inventive, even being novel, even being non-obvious. You will still not get a patent for it because it falls under the Section 3 of the Patents Act. So Section 3 of Patent Act covers all the patents, or you can say patents which are or inventions which are related to plants, animals. You cannot, even if you create a new plant tomorrow, you are not allowed to patent it. And last point I would like to tell is the mere discovery of something which is already existing in nature is also not patentable. For example, tomorrow you find a new element, something like carbon or any which is already existing in nature, you won't be getting a patent because it doesn't fall under the section. It will fall under the Section 3 of the Patents Act. So if you see the note below, it states that in United States of America, there is a special class of patents called as utility patents that focuses on industrial applicability than novelty.
Sir,
So they have created a special kind of patent. Yes.
sir, your only the first slide is visible right now.
uh, the one which says what is the criteria for patentability.
No, it is what is intellectual property right? Yeah, slide number 3, I guess.
Okay, because
Because everyone over
let
here
me check.
is having the same screen on their screen. Yeah, now it's visible. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. So this was the nuns test I was talking about: novelty, utility, non-obvious, and statutory subject matter. So yeah, so what is a utility patent? So once the United States recognized that it is a very lengthy process to take a normal patent, they created a new special kind of patent called as utility patent, which skips the first part, whether it of the nuns test, and says the if your invention has a greater utility than the previous invention, we will give you a title called as utility patents. What is the difference between utility patents and a normal patent? It will have a less number of years, as in it is protected only for 10 years. It will have a less commercial value, but it will not be at least rejected as a patent. So US has both a normal patent as well as utility patent. India is yet to adopt something called as utility patent. So next is copyright. Can you see my slide about copyright?
Mm, no, sir, not yet.
Okay, I don't know why is that happening.
Yeah, sir, now I can see it.
Okay. So copyrights. So copyright is governed by the Copyright Acts of 1957. In order to understand what is copyright, first we need to know in what uh, things we can have a copyright. So first is the original literature, such as dramatic, musical, artistic work, computer softwares, and even engineering drawings. We can have a copyright over cinematographic films and sound recordings. So a copyright is the copyright is over not over your idea, but your expression of idea is the main baseline, or with the tagline which a copyright can be explained in one sentence. Having an idea is not only necessary, but when you express your idea in some tangible form, if you write it on a paper, then there is where you get a copyright. So what happens when you get a copyright? Imagine you writing a book and getting a copyright. So what happens after that? We have the right to reproduce, to make copy, to make adaptations and translation as we want. The term for this is the lifetime of an author plus 60 years. While in the patent it was only for 20 years, the term for here is 60 years plus the lifetime of the author. So what do you get once you get a copyright? We get a resale share, right? You get royalties. So if someone has to reproduce or make copies or make adaptation, he has to take a permission from you and has to pay you some certain kind of royalty. Then only he's allowed to make interpretations or adaptations of your book per se. Now, can you see my slide? I think I have to every time go back and do this. Is my
Yes,
slide visible now?
yes.
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
So as I mentioned, my audience is very diverse. Now I will tell what kind of copyrights you can get. You can get copyrights in literary work, in your musical work, in a cinematographic work, an artistic work, and architecture work, such as the buildings themselves. A building or a building plan has a copyright, and you can register for a copyright. And if someone tries to infringe it, you still can sue them and get damages. So copyright not necessarily rests in a literary work, but in the architecture and the building itself. And as I mentioned, derivative works. Derivative work is basically if my work is in maybe the language of English and someone takes my book and tries to translate it into Marathi or any other language, he cannot do it without my permission. He cannot make a movie of about my book without any permission. For example, even the building plans itself, just by changing language of the building plans or the a little bit different kind of plans, if he has copied substantially my plan, I can still sue him for copyright infringement. So you would probably ask then, once if a book is copyrighted, how we are still allowed to make notes of it or have a critique over it or have view over it or even to teach in class, how can we use the different kinds of books? So this is one exception to copyright. It is called the doctrine of fair use. So what does doctrine of fair use say? That some unauthorized use of copyright work can be allowed and will not be considered infringement only if it is used for research, a private study, criticism, or maybe news reporting, teaching, review, etc. So as you can see the diagram here, which beautifully illustrates the intersection point. If the small portion of my book is used, it's still allowed under the fair use doctrine. If I'm critiquing a work or a new work, I'm reporting as a news, it is allowed as a fair use. Until and unless you don't use it commercial, you don't use it to gain money, we are allowed to use someone else's copyrighted work. So there's an interesting case about Rameshwar photocopy in Delhi versus the Oxford and Cambridge University. It is a very well-known case. I'll try to tell you in brief. So the Oxford, as you know, Oxford and Cambridge and their books are pretty useful for students, and they are too costly. So what did the Rameshwari photocopy, which is a photocopy shop in New Delhi University, what did they do? They just compiled the sections which are uh, easy for them to understand, which are needed for them to understand, and compile them in their own book, or as you can see, as Xerox book. So Oxford and Cambridge filed a case against the photocopy machine, saying that you are using our work to commercially and compiling and commercially selling. But the Indian court said that, first of all, that Delhi University has a license with the Rameshwari photocopy, saying that you will always your whatever the compilation is, compilation of all these books at a very minimum cost. The whole principle behind it was to use to gain the knowledge for and give knowledge to students who can't afford the costly books which the Cambridge and Oxford really give. So the High Court said that yes, you are right. When it comes to this, you are not using it for a commercial value, and more importantly, the sale of Cambridge and Oxford's books, which are compiled, did not go down substantially for them to file a case. And after a few months, Cambridge and Oxford finally took down their case, saying that sales are really not affected by one photocopy machine, and that's why fair use. This is where doctrine of fair use came into being and helped a lot of students. So the third IPR, which I would like to discuss, is about trademarks. So as I know, one faculty, there is a faculty of beauty and wellness also, which is attending the lecture. So for them, I think they would know the power of trademarks. So what is a trademark? A trademark is any sign which can distinguish the goods of one trader from those to another. A sign can include words, logos, pictures, or combination of. Sorry, can you see it now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Yeah,
We're able to see.
a combination of these. So if you are traveling down a highway and you see a red colored M on a flag on a post, you always know that without even guessing that it's a McDonald's. So how do you recognize this? It is just because of the trademark which they have been using it for a lot of time, and how that trademark is used as a marketing tool so that customers can recognize their brand from anywhere in the world. So in order to have a brand like this or a trademark like this, we need to register. How can we register a trademark? We can of course file a application in the trademark registry. But in order to file an application, we must know uh, what and how our trademark should be. So these are the 4 pointers which I would like to give, saying that a trademark needs to be distinctive. It should be very much different from the all existing trademarks. For example, as I said, M with a McDonald M, which is in red color. If tomorrow I say a W with the same red color, it is not distinctive. People will not understand, and most probably I won't be able to get a trademark. It should not be deceptive also. It can't be a small M or a similar M to the that of McDonald's, and I shouldn't deceive people or make them believe that my product is as similar as their product, or I'm using their power of trademark and then trying to get increase my sales. The third point is it should not be contrary to law or morality. For example, according to the Trademark Act, we cannot have our emblems, a flag emblem as a trademark. You cannot have goddesses, pictures of our god and goddesses as a trademark. If you are familiar with the a case of trademark where the Lakshmi bomb used in Diwali is always under scrutiny, saying that you cannot use our picture of our goddesses on as a trademark on something like a firecracker. So it shouldn't be contrary to law or morality. And the last point is it should not be identical or similar to any earlier marks for the same or similar goods. For example, if I maybe like Nike, you can see always different kinds of maybe for Puma, you see Puma in the market. So these kinds of brands are not trademarked. They are just doing this illegally. But that kind of similar trademarks cannot be granted by the trademark authority. So my next slide will tell you in brief how or what you should do in order to get a trademark which is very powerful, and what are different types of trademark you can register. So as you see, I have written variety of marks in different colors. So having a different color combination will also increase your possibility of registering a trademark. For example, Coca-Cola, as you know, has that red and white color in them, and the font of Coca-Cola is very distinctive than others. So if tomorrow, if you say maybe use Pepsi Cola and have the same red and white combination and same font, even the name being different, you will not be granted a trademark. If you see the shadow behind the variety of marks, it's still a part of the trademark. So in order to get a good trademark or a strong trademark, you need to have very unique and very distinct trademark than others. For example, now you see the name Kodak. Everyone knows what is Kodak, but it doesn't have any meaning at all. It doesn't have, it is in any language, Kodak is just an invented word. So some words like these will get you trademark so easily because it won't be similar to any other trademarks. Now you see Apple for computers. So Apple is an English word, is in fruit, everyone knows. But using Apple for a computer was not known until the Apple company started using the computers and branded its name as Apple. Now you see the power of trademark. Now everyone knows Apple more for a computer rather than a fruit. So having these kinds of trademarks, having arbitrary trademarks will give you a more strong protection. Rather than, if you see the last example is the baby dry for nappies. It is a hint, it is a suggestion of what this product could be. Giving you a hint and a suggestion about what this product could be will decrease your chances of getting a, a trademark. So the next IPR is geographical indications. As the name suggests, geographical indication is basically an indication used to identify any agricultural, natural, or manufactured goods originating from a definite territory. As you can see the certain images, the point you see these images, you know that it's a Kolhapuri chappal which is being made in Kolhapur. So why is it called as Kolhapuri chappal, and what is so distinct about that? So in order to have a geographical indication registered under or in order to have it registered on a certain product like chappal, what is that it is so different from other chappals? So first of all, it should have a special quality and characteristics. And these special quality and characteristics should be defined to either the climate in that area, or production characteristics unique to that geographical location. So now you see Darjeeling tea. There are places where tea is grown, but Darjeeling tea will have its own taste, have its own smell, and will even be like you can perceive it as soon as you get to know that this is a Darjeeling tea. And why is that? It is because of the climatic and the geographical conditions of Darjeeling, a certain kind of crop is grown. So the difference between the first three IPRs and this is that geographical indications are not given or granted to one single person. For example, no one single-handedly owns Darjeeling tea or Kolhapuri chappal. It's always given to an association of person, maybe the Darjeeling board tea, or the producers who produce chappals in Kolhapur. So tomorrow, if you want to produce Darjeeling tea, or you have to make a Kolhapuri chappal, you can't do it in Pune, even being following the same process. So what is the importance of getting the GI? So if tomorrow you start producing chappals in Pune, having similar characteristics, having looking the same, feeling the same, and you start selling them as Kolhapuri chappal, you can be prosecuted. You can be prosecuted by the board which is having the GI in Kolhapur, saying that you are producing it in Pune, you cannot have this GI because the only material and the kind of process which are used in Kolhapur only make it called as Kolhapuri chappal, and that's why it is essential that these kinds of registration is done. You see the champagne tag. Till now, everyone thought that champagne is kind of a liquor which anyone can start selling, but champagne is a name of place, and a liquor which originates in that place through its process is only called as champagne, and anything other than that cannot be called as champagne. So as you see, the registration of geographical indications is a period of 10 years, and renewal is possible for further period of 10 years each. So once you register, you can keep on renewing it till the point you feel that your product has the geographical value over it. For example, if you see products like beauty and wellness, they use certain kind of natural things such as aloe vera or any plant. So if an aloe vera, a type of aloe vera is only being cultivated, let's say in Pune itself, hypothetically, nowhere found in the world, then they still can have a GI saying that this kind of aloe vera is used in our products, and this aloe vera is only being produced in Pune. So we would like to file for a geographical indication, and there is a possibility that it could get one. So after geographical indication, the fifth kind of IPR which I would like to discuss is the designs. The Designs Act of 2000 is what governs the designs and the registration of designs, and what do you really mean by designs. So according to Section 2 of Designs Act, What is a design? A design is a feature of shape, configuration, pattern, ornament, or composition of lines and colors, which is applied to any article of manufacture in 2D or 3D or in both form. The most important point of design is that the finished article appeals is appealed and judged solely by the eye. For example, any product, let's take a example of a bottle. A bottle having a, you can register a bottle's design, but can you register a design which helps you hold the bottle in a better way? For example, there are some kind of crevices which can help you holding the bottle. So once there is a functionality attached to the design, you can register it under design. You may register it under copyright, you may register under it under a trademark, or you can also register under it a patent, but not under designs. Designs is only for appeal of the eye, and aesthetically it should be more rather than the functional value of it. So what are the prerequisites for a design to qualify for protection? First of all, it should be novel and original. Your design cannot be a copy of any other design, or it shouldn't be similar to any other design. It should be very original and novel. It should be applicable to a functioning article. Article which is used in industry, article which can be used in industry. It should be a functional article, and you apply your design to it. Then only it is possible for you to register it under the Design Act. It should be visible on a finished article. Sure, you cannot use a design which is inside of an article and still file a design application for it. And as I said, there should be no prior publication or disclosure of the design. Maybe the design is not used for many years and you try to again use it for a different kind of products, it will still not be allowed, as once the design is known in the public domain, you cannot again file for the application of this design. So the protection you receive is only for the appearance of the article, and now how it works. So there's a difference between, as I told, the difference between patent and design, or copyright and design, or trademark and design. It's just that you get the protection for how the product or the application or the appearance for the article. It is registered in intention to protect the design, which will have a commercial or industrial use. The duration of protection is initially for 10 years and again extendable by paying certain amount of fees to 5 years. So in total about 15 years. So designs of stamps, label, token cards, cartoons, or part of an article which not sold separately cannot be registered because they still have a value, except value other than the aesthetical value. The stamp will have a value, it will show where your product is going, it will uh, have some certain value just rather than being physically aesthetically appealing to the eye. So that is why you cannot register them under the design. You may register them under trademark but not under design. So when companies are not competing at equal price and functionality, means if your product and my products are at equal price and are equal functionality, design is the only differential thing that matters. A classic example of this is the Coca-Cola bottle. The shape of Coca-Cola bottle was first and registered before. So you know the design of a Coca-Cola bottle. So the competitor of Coca-Cola bottle, what did they do? In order to increase their sale, they bought the empty bottles from the local shops and started filling their own cold drinks into them because they knew the design of Coca-Cola is so familiar and is so famous in the world that once they do that, everyone will think this is a part of Coca-Cola. So just having a design which is similar helped them so much, but finally it was illegal and they were stopped from using the bottle of Coca-Cola. So this is the power of design. Having a design, a strong design will always help you to differentiate your product from anyone else's product. So the next IPR would be a trade secret. So it is a relatively new IPR. There is no firm act or there is no legislation in India regarding trade secret, but our courts have still recognized it as an IPR. So what is a trade secret? A trade secret is a formula, pattern, physical device, idea, or a process or a compilation of information which is not generally known or reasonably ascertainable, by which a business can obtain an economic advantage over the competitors of customers. For example, what are the potential examples of trade secrets? A secret formula of sports drink, a survey method used by professional pollsters. You see KFC's food recipe or Maggie's masala sauce are still trade secrets. Why do you not patent something such as the masala, Maggie masala, or KFC, or for that matter of fact, the secret formula of Coca-Cola? So why do you need to use trade secret when you have all these IPRs under your belt? So that I would like to explain in the this slide. So as I told, Coca-Cola was invented in 1886. Its process was not patented and is still not patented till now. It is only protected by trademark, but it has a trade secret. So why did they use trade secret as their IPR and not patent? Because as I told, patent is only valid for 20 years. So once after these 20 years, it will be available to all public. So anyone can use it. And in order, as I mentioned in the patents slide, when you file for a patent, you need to show your full specification. You need to show what kind of products you are using, what kind of chemicals you are using in your invention. If that would have been done by Coca-Cola, it would have maybe got some economical benefits for 20 years, and after that it would be difficult for them, or it will be impossible for them to stop other competitors from using the same formula. So what did they opt for? They opted to keep it as a trade secret. So what are the pros of keeping it as a trade secret? As you know, till now nobody knows the formula for Coke. It is hypothetically, or maybe it is believed that only two people know the formula for Coke, and that's why they are never allowed to travel together, so that they won't die at same time and the trade secret would be lost forever. So this is the power of trade secrets. And so in order to show that you have a trade secret, if ever it's get infringed by someone else, so first you need to show that for example, let's take a business model, or there's a faculty from I know there's a faculty which is attending from logistics school also. So the business model or the pattern or the how you conduct your business is also a trade secret. So if it gets infringed someday in the courts, you have to just prove that the business model was was having a commercial value. You took great extents to protect that secret, and having the secret out will affect your company or affect your company in a huge way. For example, if tomorrow everyone gets to know the secret of Coca-Cola's secret formula, the company is almost into bankruptcy, because that's the only thing which they are banking on right now, because nobody knows the formula and it still tastes everywhere same in the world. So after knowing all these kind of IPR, just having awareness is not important. As I mentioned in this slide, whether to keep it as or whether to disclose it, whether to patent it, whether to trademark it, or whether to use it as a design or whether to copyright. It is very much important for you to understand what kind of IP and what is the value of your IP which you have. So now coming to what IPR, once you get an IPR, how important your IPR is in with respect to whether economically gaining some profits, or how to build a economy over it. So as this slide says, IPR as a tool to compete with multinationals. This is a case of Goldtouch Technologies versus Microsoft, which was a very well-known case. So to briefly explain, Goldtouch was a small company which invented a new mouse and ergonomically maneuvered keyboard. It filed for application for patent. It got its patent. After getting patent, it licensed its product to IBM and Lexmark. And after that, it also approached Microsoft to license its patent. Microsoft rejected their patent, saying that they don't want to have a business with them. And 1 year later, Microsoft files their own patent, which has similar or substantial similar elements of the Goldtouch company's mouse. And Microsoft being such a huge brand name, as I told, having a brand name will help you a lot. Goldtouch started losing sales because everyone was now moving to a product from Microsoft because it was very well known. So once Goldtouch started losing their sales, they approached the court saying that this is our patent has been infringed, and we need to stop Microsoft in order to for us to use the patent which is granted to us. So, and the current situation right now of that case is that Microsoft has been stopped from selling that product patent till the high courts have made the decision. So only because having a patent over their mouse or over their invention, Goldtouch even tried to, or even tried to stop, or even think of stopping a multinational company such as Microsoft from selling a product. So this is what a power of patent could do. So this slide, now once you are acquainted with all kinds of IPR, I would like to show a simple product such as an CD player has so many different kinds of IPs involved in it. So a CD player would have the music which is played on the CD, which can be protected as a copyright. The design can be protected on the shape. Basically, the shape can be protected under the industrial design. The brand name, let's say Sony or whatever company you want to call, can be registered under trademark. And the basic functioning and various technical parts of the patent can be protected can be protected under the patent. So a simple product like CD player is having almost all IPRs inculcated in him. It's just that you need to identify those IP and get protection over it. So why is IPR important? As you see, the semiconductor design IP revenue of 2019 shows the top 10 companies and the amount of growth which they have been seeing from 2018 to 2019. As you can see, the number speaks for themselves. Having the semiconductor design registering for them has increased their growth, their share from 2018 to 2019. So wage premium is the highest for patent and copyright intensive industries, but considerably for trademark intensive industries, the wage premium, the basic wage premium is offered is 30% than that of the normal wages which are offered. Intellectual property can account for over 40% of the average business, and it's often not reflected in their balance sheet because they are not aware that the 40% of their average business is because of the IP and the protection of IP, and their revenue comes out of IP. So this matrix of why is IP are important. The top 5 intellectual property metrics today, as you see, patent files 61%. So if a company sees they would like, or for not necessarily company, even a university like Symbiosis, they need to know that 61% of their patents, they should focus usually they are focusing 61% on patents, 21% of trademarks, then they're granting out licenses, IPs, then this kind of revenue is very much needed for anyone. Creating an revenue out of the intellectual property is what is still missing in India. As you see, one snapshot of the Economic Times, Wipro aims to make $150 million from intellectual property this financial year. So having $150 million in financial year just because of IP, we need to understand the importance of IP and how it can create revenue for your revenue. Now let's compare us India to US in terms of IPR. In US, the patent, utility patents, trademark, copyright, everything has more protection and more rigid and more strict implications because they have understood the importance of IPR. So why is US a 16 trillion economy? So one of the few points I would like to mention is IPR industries account for 38.2% of the total GDP of the US and almost for the three-fourths of the US exports. Intellectual property accounts for 6.6 trillion in added value. There are almost 81 IP intensive industries in the US which account for 27.9 million jobs in 2040. Merchandise export in the US from IP intensive industries reach about $842 billion. So these numbers are just unimaginable for us right now. But if we start to recognize the importance of IP and we start acting over it, that's where we would have a definite growth in the coming year, is what I feel. More than half of the revenue of US motion picture and video industries, lessors of non-financial intangible assets, and independent artists, writers, and performers are directly derived from IP. The movies, the having copyright over movies, having copyright over their songs, and how to convert them into commercially valuable is what US has been doing for the past few years. 67% of US companies own technological assets that they are failing to exploit, and they're potentially eligible for intellectual property protection valued up to 1 trillion. So even after this, they are still 67% of US companies have technological assets, but they're failing to exploit. India is nowhere near right now, but it should realize the potential of IPR in terms of economy. So now my last slide is something which I designed especially for this session, is to show the school-wise importance for the type of IPR and what kind of degree of importance you can have, what types of IPR relating to different kinds of faculties and different kinds of colleges which are attending right now. So let's take 2 minutes to understand this slide. So on the left side, it's types of IPR, as I mentioned: patent, copyright, design, trademark, trade secrets, and geographical indications. So logistics, port management, architecture, mechatronics, automotive, construction engineering, beauty, wellness, and data science are the different kinds of schools which would have the IP imbibed in them. So when it comes to patent, logistics and port management architecture may have a less importance of patent, but if you see, the patent generation from mechatronics, automotive, and construction engineering would be very high. In beauty and wellness also, if they create a process, it can be patented, a process to maybe for a new cream which helps in your age skin moisturizing, or anything which gives a process to a new product and is inventive, still be can be filed under patent. Data science inventions can be filed under patent. If you see copyright, logistics, port, and management would have copyrights over their books, over their methods of how to go around. If they have to write few books about it, they can be copyrighted. Architecture, of course, it is a very strong IP in architecture, as you can have copyright over your buildings, you can have copyright over your plans, and then try to enforce it if someone tries to infringe this. and copyright is maybe low when it comes to has a low value in mechatronics and engineering, has a low value in beauty and wellness, and a low value in data and science. The next is design. So design has a very high value in architecture. Beauty and wellness also will have maybe the bottle of the shape of the bottle, the design of the bottle will have a significant value in beauty and wellness. So my point really here is, it's not that you cannot file a patent in other, or maybe there's no value of design in architecture, or there's no value of design in logistics and port management, but you need to understand different kinds of IP and what will they provide with regards to your requirements as per the industry you are in. So trade secrets, if you see, when it comes to mechatronics, if you have to patent something, you have to fully give the specification, and you cannot keep any secret if you have to patent it. But when it comes to logistics, port management, and trade secrets, so the method how you conduct your business, the logistics behind it, you not necessarily have to patent it, or you have to go try to file it under trademark. But the most, according to me, the most sensible thing would be to get it under the trade secret, so that no one knows what kind of methods you are using, and but still they are protected under the trade secret. So this is what my last slide was about. So I think I'm done with my presentation. If someone has any questions, they are feel free to ask them.
What is the last part of slide, GI? The last row?
Yeah, I'll explain it. So now the geographical indications, as I mentioned, it in beauty and wellness, as I mentioned, aloe vera, if it is being used in your beauty and wellness product, any product which is used in beauty and wellness, but it originates only from a certain geographical area, let's take example of Pune, then you can still file it under GI. All other things cannot be filed under GI because it should have certain kind of geographical implication. Your product should have geographical affluence over it. So that is why it's low in all other branches, but beauty and wellness, you still can file for a GI if you find something similar to it.
So may I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
I just wanted to know about introduction of brands. See, like what happens is now there is a brand which was Fair and Lovely, which has become Glow and Lovely, right?
Yes.
Fair and Lovely is rechristened as Glow and Lovely. The brand is Glow and Lovely now. What if I use the brand Fair and Lovely now?
So in order to so the whole concept of trademark, as I mentioned, is you have to create a new distinctive mark.
Okay.
So Fair and Lovely is known almost all over the world.
Yes.
Practically, if you try to register it, the trademark registry will not allow you to register, because consumers will always think that it's.
No, but what if they have
the consumers?
If they have changed Fair and Lovely to Glow, and I want to capitalize on Fair and Lovely.
Exactly, you are not allowed to capitalize on the different on a brand value, and because the whole concept behind it is you are trying to deceive the customers that your product is connected to Fair and Lovely somewhere. So I'll take an example. Tata was never registered as a trademark before when it started. But when people start, so not necessarily your trademark needs to be registered, but if you try to go into say use Tata furniture, and let's assume that there is nothing called as Tata furniture. The Tata only exists in maybe food products. You are still not allowed to do that because you are trying to deceive the customers and trying to make them feel that your product is somewhere related to Tata. So this is the whole concept behind of not able to use, even if the trademark is not registered, because it's so well known to the Indian market and international market that you won't be able to capitalize on that.
Right. Thank you.
Sir, I have a question. Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I can
I
hear
head
you.
the School of Digital Media and Marketing. Yeah.
Okay.
Now the digital is no longer an option; it's a necessity. You know, and digital earlier was emerging. Now it's
Okay.
almost like dominating. So,
Yes.
with that background, what is the scope and importance? In terms of talking about the importance of type of IPR school-wise.
School wise. So digital. First of all, digital means
I mean,
usually.
I have an example like you were talking about Coca-Cola,
Yes.
and during the same time, Coca-Cola is almost 120 years old company, or maybe more than that. At the same
Yes.
time, AT&T also launched, and AT&T is also that old company with 500 plus patents
Okay.
on their name.
Yes. So, what is that you want me to answer? Means what? How? I am not clear with your question. What kind of answer you are expecting? Or question is it? What will digital media do, or
Yeah, scope. I
what
wanted
is
to
your
know.
question really? I can't. So digital media is in. See, you need to have a certain product in order to intellectually the intellectual property right. So on digital media, you can say always it will come under trademark, because you will have your own company, you will have your own marketing strategies. If it's a marketing strategy, it can be protected under trade secret. If it is logistic, it can be protected under trade secret. If it's a company's name, it can be protected under trademark. So depending upon what in digital media you do, what kind of IPR you need to follow is what I would like to tell.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So I think no one is having any questions now.
Yes.
Okay, then I would like to conclude by giving a vote of thanks. Um, Thank you, sir, for such